Hello, welcome to another episode of the Horror Vision Presents Elements of Horror. I am Sean.
And I'm Cletus.
I'm John.
I'm Missy.
And I'm Ray.
Cletus, good to have you with us. Cletus is a local militia member that I met in the backwoods of Tennessee who likes to hang shoplifters by their wrists out back of his gas station and slowly whittle away their flesh until there's not much left. And then eventually, if the elements don't kill them, then he does.
If that ain't American, I don't know what is. But thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
It's true. It's very true. It's very American.
And you only accept Canadian currency.
Correct. It's true. It's the only thing worth a damn these days, apparently.
300 will get you a sandwich unless it's Canadian.
That's right.
So this Elements of Horror is a little something different because we're doing a brand new movie. So we're recording this on Tuesday, April 16th. I'm going to put it up the following Monday. So that should give people that are interested. I feel like this movie's getting a lot of attention. This is Alex Garland's Civil War. I picked this because I feel like I knew this going in. I picked it before I saw it, and I was right. Just about the scariest fucking movie I've seen in I don't know how long. Absolutely terrifying. And anybody that's going to be like, that's not fucking horror, hold on to that, because that's going to be a catchphrase you're going to want to remember in a couple weeks. But I don't know what your definition of horror is. Mine, horror is a very, large, wide open place. And this fits into it just fine. So, man, where the fuck do we even begin?
Yeah, where do we begin?
John, kick it off.
Yeah, this film I feel is Alex Garland's masterpiece, second only to Annihilation. And there's a lot to unpack here. I think a lot of people, they didn't like this film, or they were really turned off by this film because they went in expecting it to be a direct commentary on what's happening now, and to have overlaps between what's happening in the story and present day concerns and Trump's divisiveness and so on and so forth. And they felt like Alex Garland didn't deliver that to them, so that it's a failure by their reckoning based on that. And I say two things. One, yes, he did comment on the present day. He just makes you work for it. He doesn't envision a passive audience. He has a little bit more respect for his audience than that. And second, it's way, way, way more than that. The whole time I was thinking about how his films are all about human failure to reinvent themselves and to evolve in this face of crisis. We see it in Annihilation. We see it in Ex Machina. We see it in, if you count 28 Days Later as an Alex Garland film, we see it there as well. We definitely see it in Men, and we see it here. And the last thing I'll say for the moment is, if I were to do a double feature, just to kind of switch it up, it's a double feature maybe with a non-horror film, it would be The Hurt Locker, because
oh yeah,
just how enthralled the characters become and lose themselves to an addiction for combat, and how numb they just feel over anything else, and how we experience this through the character of Jesse through the arc of the whole film, I think makes it a perfect companion piece with not with The Hurt Locker, and also a good companion piece with Zero Dark 30, especially the final shot of Zero Dark 30, but I'll get into that later on.
Wow. Yeah, Hurt Locker definitely. However, I would say if you did that as a double feature, I don't think you'd sleep. I wouldn't. because Hurt Locker ramped me the fuck up when I watch it. I watch that shit at home. So, and this did too. Uh, Ray, you just left the theater an hour and a half ago.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
When you walked
I,
out, did you draw your firearm and walk to your car just firing into the sky, screaming at the top of your lungs?
no, but maybe if I'd had one, I might have. Um, I second that. I think it is his masterpiece. Definitely. It's I mean, there is a comment on American society and culture and how um, I like the fact that you do have to work for it, this comment, but I like the fact that it is somewhat apolitical in like who the sides are and who they represent, and that it's to me, I feel like it felt like he was trying to point out that when we become so divisive and so on sides, and at some point we lose track of what those sides mean too. Like I love that scene with the Jesse Plemons character because he's a real opportunist. He's one of those like people you hear about that is like cutting off like people's ears and things like that in war. I think he's just a violent man who's just taking the opportunity to use his violence against other people and get it sanctioned. Um,
Yep.
and but just the way he's like, well, you're an American? Yeah. Well, what kind? Like it he's drawing a strange he draws strange distinctions. Um and I thought it was interesting that like when Joe says Florida and then the other two say Colorado and I forget what the third one was. But
Missouri.
he's like, thank you, Missouri. He's like, that's America. But he doesn't include Florida, which I thought was odd. But I think it's part of the thing of the film is that I think it's a blurring of like, well, what are we actually fighting about at this point? Are we
Yep.
fighting each other? Or are we fighting ideologies? And like how those ideologies become dehumanizing and we're now just combatants against each other. And I think it's not just this country. I think it's the whole world. I mean, we've got a world that's engulfed in these combats, and we're not thinking about each other as people anymore. We're just thinking about each other as like that side and this side. And at the same time, the film interestingly has these moments that he's showcasing how we can be so resilient in the face of tragedy, in the face of terrible things. Like when they're at the camp, all those people are just trying to keep living their lives. They're just trying to survive and do so by still telling each other funny stories and still laugh and sing songs and read books and just try to keep going. And it's so impressive to me that he included that. And like I don't know. It's a very multifaceted film. I think you're right. It is a horror movie. It's just uh, a horror in a different way. Like you know, it's war as horror, and war is pretty fucking horrible. And those battle sequences are so impressive. They really are. Like they're so stark. I think that's part of the reason that it might be difficult for people to watch. They are so stark. There's no like pulling back. There's no enjoying it. It's like the battle sequences in Goodwill not Goodwill Hunting, I'm sorry.
Goodwill Hunting.
Same actor, different film. I'm so sorry. It was the Matt Damon connection. I'm so sorry. I was trying. It was another three-word title, and it fucked it up. Saving Private Ryan. That was a mistake. Saving Private Ryan. But I remember seeing Saving Private Ryan years ago in the theater, and I went with friends from school, and we were all like seniors in high school, and they were like, "God damn, that movie is harsh." And I thought, well, what did you think a horror movie is going to be like? And they were like, it was so brutal and so stark. And I went, well, that's war. He's not playing it out for glory. He's playing it out for what it was like. And that's what this movie's like. Like you're sitting there and you're like, yeah, it's just hard to watch. and taking it as enjoyment. You're just like, oh God, this is so
Well,
hard.
the action sequences are the antithesis of John Wick. Nothing against John Wick, but like
Yes.
action
Yes,
movies
absolutely.
typically got like every fucking gunshot in Civil War is traumatic, and they're just a
Yeah.
ton of them. But if you've ever fired a gun, it is louder. You think you're prepared. It is so fucking loud. Like it is traumatic the first time you hear it because you don't know how loud it's going to be. So now just do that in this movie. Just, I mean, pop them off.
Yeah.
And
And unlike other things we've seen where like person gets shot, keeps going, person,
yeah,
takes a bullet, gets up, keeps going. Oh, someone gets shot, they're done, they're dead, they're on the fucking ground and they're not coming back up.
yeah.
And it's that, yeah, that it's that in this movie. And you're like, God damn, like it does not pull back. But I think it's the gut punch, the punch in the face that needs to be watched right now and needs to be intake.
I agree.
The world is in chaos a little bit.
Let's use that. Missy, tell us about your experience. And I know that the sound, we talked about this, had a lot to do with how you felt about this movie.
I hated this movie, and I had a horrible experience at the theater. It was like one of the worst, not because of anything with the theater, it was how I perceived the film. And part of that is my fault. I love most of Alex Garland's other films. I saw his name in the word dystopian and was expecting it to be more like dystopian, post-apocalyptic, and not so much focused on like being a war picture. I don't watch war movies. I can watch like the goriest fucking horror movies and doesn't bother me, doesn't faze me. I hate war pictures. I don't watch the news. I feel like I want to put a warning out there for anybody who has anxiety where you are either overstimulated by excessive noise or you don't watch the news because it amplifies your anxiety. Skip it. Like, unless you're really interested, I didn't enjoy it. It actually triggered a pretty bad spin out that took me, like, I couldn't shake it off until about last night.
Wow.
And on top of it, I saw it at the Dolby Theater because it just happened to be the time that I could go. So then I have this vibrating seat with every gunshot that it was not. About halfway through at 11 o'clock, halfway through the movie, I considered leaving, and I don't usually leave. Like, I never leave theaters. I don't quit movies usually. And the only reason I stayed was because it's like, well, you've already watched half of it and you're going to want to talk about it anyways. So you may as well just finish it at this point. But I mean, I couldn't get into it as a film. I felt like I was being assaulted by noise through the whole thing. There are certain lines, again, I like post-apocalyptic stories, dystopian, I mean, horror. Like, I think if it was like rebel factions, like freedom fighters fighting to survive or fighting a corrupt government, I might have been okay with it. I probably would have been okay with it. I probably would have liked it. But then their media just running into these awful situations by choice with nothing but cameras. And I couldn't get behind their cause enough to feel like I supported them, I cared about them. And I mean, the second half of the movie, I was actually checking my clock, and I never do. It didn't work for me. The characters fell flat. There are a couple things I do like. Like, I loved the desolate Midwest scenescapes. I love the way it's shot. I love that they give us the black and white stills that simulate the Nikon shots on the camera, so that we're seeing things through the photojournalist's eyes. I thought that was very cool. And it does use sound incredibly well.
Aggressively, malevolently.
Right. It was very aggressive, and it didn't work for me. And I love stories. I love film. They've always been an escape. It was way too rooted in like real world politics and whatnot. This is why I don't watch the news, because I will imagine things like this. I don't. Um, I'd much rather watch Mad Max or something like that. This was not for me. But I think it's a well-made film. I will say that. I think it's a well-made movie.
I'll say I thought a lot about hearing you talk about this movie the other day after you saw it, and my reaction to the house that Jack built, with which John, I just loathed. I hated so very much. And
I was actually thinking about that too. So I'm
Yeah.
curious to hear where you go with it, because
I think we're similar because I do think this is a dystopian movie. It's just
Yeah.
there's no fantasy to it at all.
right, it's too real world.
This will be our dystopia. This is our dystopia. There's so
Right.
many things in this where I'm like, you know, the gas station where they pull up and there's the three guys with automatic rifles and a couple guys hanging out back. Somebody that saw this movie has seen that in real life. I guarantee it. Probably in Florida, I'm gonna guess. But I mean, I'm making a joke, but not really. But I think with serial killers, I've always said I don't like, because I don't like the fact that, like, yeah, people do this to one another, and I don't like to revel in that at all. And I think it's the same thing. I think we just have it for different aspects of the genre. You know what I mean? So, because my reaction to House of Jack built, although I do think I I for myself, like I said on that episode, I don't think I'm right, but I also, for me, I don't think I'm wrong.
Mhm.
But yeah, I don't know. I think it's just a defense mechanism to some degree, which is fine. You know, that's totally fine.
Sean, two
So
things really quick. One,
yeah,
half of our Florida listeners just hit unsubscribe right now.
yeah, I know. I'm sorry.
And second, I've never been a Lars von Trier fan. You know, much to the consternation of like all of my most of my friends. So yeah, the feeling on House that Jack built is near mutual.
Okay, cool. Anthony, talk about Civil War.
I went into the theater looking for a film about freedom, and I found it. So, you know, wow. This movie, right off the bat, there's probably 3 or 4 scenes in this that are going to be burned in my memory for the rest of my life. There's very shocking imagery, and it's interesting to have a mirror shown at America to really bring it home that, like, look, this is the direction you're heading down if you continue on your path. And it and in that respect, I mean, that's the horrific aspect to it. Not even the war part, like just the road you're on. I mean, it's the worst we could possibly be on right now at this point in time in America. And going into a character development later on in the film, as far as like PTSD, I've known men who have come home from war and are not the same and become those junkies who no longer want to be husbands and fathers and only want to deploy again and go back out and continue to do whatever they have to do to live in this mindset that makes them unable to function in normal society when they get home. And you see that in the Hurt Locker again. Like that's something that
Yeah,
is one of the prominent things in that film. And so it hits home, having known military personnel that have gone through these types of things. And it's not a huge aspect of the film, it's not focused on the military side of that, but what living in that state of mind constantly can do over long periods of time. And the characters are just, they're hardened, they've been through, they've seen it all. You see that one bit, it's a little montage where Lee's just showing, various things that she shot very up close and personal. There's one horrible one
Yeah.
involving a tire. And again, one of
That's
those things.
haunting. That's as haunting an image that picture of the little girl running down the street covered in napalm, isn't it?
Yeah,
That's just gonna
of
stick with you
course.
forever.
Of course.
Forever. It's gonna be in your head.
And like I said,
Lives
love or
rent
hate,
free now.
yeah, love or hate what this film became, because obviously, it subverted expectations to a lot of people. I know a lot of folks thought they were going into an action film and had no idea what they were getting into when they got in there. In fact, in my showing, I had two couples get up and leave because they weren't prepared for what they saw on screen. The violence was too much. But I mean, this is every day in war-torn countries and things like that. So it's kind of interesting to see people who obviously couldn't handle that kind of stuff just be like, you know what, I'm safe where I'm at right now, and I don't want anything to do with this. And I do encourage people to get involved, or at least make the decisions in life that don't lead us to these places. But to be very dismissive of it is I think is the wrong thing. But this movie it's exceptional. It's beautifully shot. He does this thing with slow motion at times, and where he'll slow the camera down where you can, so basically through the lens of the camera being used to take the photographs, where you're getting those stills.
Yeah.
And there's just gorgeous camera work throughout this film. So despite the content itself, just everything done behind the camera is literally a work of art. It's fantastic. The acting is superb. The writing is superb. I think my one complaint that a lot of folks do have is you don't know who the bad guy is. You don't know who to root for, and maybe that's the point. Obviously,
It
that's
is.
the point. There are no
I think it
winners.
is, absolutely.
But I mean, hands down, this is it's a hard watch, but it's necessary. It's definitely necessary, especially at this time and age right now. Everybody does need to go watch this film and support it. It's A24's biggest budget, and I unfortunately I think this is what Garland's last film. I think he's saying that he's bowing out maybe after his involvement with the 28 Days Later thing, and that's it.
So actually, I wanted to point this out. So there's a YouTube channel called The Movie Podcast. It's two gentlemen from Canada. They put up a interview
trust
with
them?
him.
Or you trust me?
No, hold on.
Kind of American.
They asked him. So they said, we were really sorry to hear that you're not going to direct anymore. He's like, well, I was misquoted. He's not going to be directing for the foreseeable future because, in his words, him and Danny Boyle are doing a 3-picture series of sequels to 28 Days and 28 Weeks Later. So he's going to be involved in that. So he's not going to have so for the foreseeable future.
But yeah, just to close with what I was saying real quick is this film creates a stark reality that is possible, and we're on a slippery slope in America, and it's time to start watching your step. And it's just a spectacle to behold. I think people need to go out and watch this film. It's beautiful. It's ugly, but it's beautiful.
Well said.
I would agree with that.
Well said.
During the actual Civil War, the actual U.S. American Civil War, there was this term that photographers would use called seeing the elephant. And what it referred to was this hollow gaze of on the faces of soldiers when they'd have their pictures taken after the war versus when the same soldiers would get their picture taken before the war. And they used this was, of course, in lieu of the fact, they didn't have the terminology to describe PTSD, and then later you'd get to World War I, and terms like shell shock would be used, and then post-traumatic stress would come after Vietnam syndrome and so forth. But to see the elephant, describes this sort of like very hollow 1,000-yard stare, and you get that in like the famous Tom Leah photograph from Battle of Peleliu in World War II, and so on and so forth. And you see it at the very end of, without giving anything away, you see it at the final shot of Zero Dark 30. Jessica Chastain has seen the elephant. And throughout this film, there are so many shots of characters seeing the elephant just intentionally, intentionally in close up. There's so much close up, just like a complete vast, like cutting back and forth between close shot to wide shot. Characters such as Lee, played by Kirsten Dunst, are constantly framed in the middle, hollow gaze, seeing the elephant. And we see that, very much throughout the film with the character Jessie, until the very end, when, she's just sort of like almost, she's just almost on like, a drug-fueled rush, as it were. So, and that, and the use of like, characters like shot dead center in the frame with the blur, like in shallow focus with everything, like just sort of blurred, kind of like that old fashioned, kind of a 1960s Kodak blur, to kind of bring that into effect. And it's also when she's on, like when Lee's on the ground and it's cutting back and forth, shallow focus with like the, flowers and the grass in front of her. Absolutely loved that. And I find that, to the point about the black and white photography, it's almost as if, we're having it's a film within the film. It's like a whole other movie that's weaved into this other film, and it's an alternate, it's almost like, we're seeing an alternate reality, in stark contrast to the other reality that we're seeing elsewhere.
Yeah, well said. A lot of those elephant shots. Now that you say that, like a lot of them. Because that's what it's about them, right? I think that's like one of the big misnomers. I feel like the Jesse Plemons scene in the commercial suggests that what kind of American are you? That's the parlance of our times now. Who did you vote for? Who do you stand by? Are you, are you wackadoo this side or wackadoo that side? Because sometimes it seems like there's only the wackadoos left, right?
And the fact that he has rose-colored glasses literally is now
yes, I didn't even think of that, but yes. But like Ray said, he's a serial killer that now has carte blanche. He can, hey, dude, this is like, it's like the purge. Like, you kidding me? Now I could just do what I like to do, like, and not even worry about it anymore. But I feel like that scene in the commercial suggested something that I was very pleasantly, because it's totally apolitical, even though it's not. He makes you work for it. I didn't realize it, or I kind of got it, but I was like, oh, that's an interpretation. And then, I don't even know that we should say it on camera, but then the next day I was like, oh yeah, there's something about Offerman's character that is 100% like, yeah, by the way.
I mean, he's kind of Trumpian a little bit, but to be honest, he looks a little bit more like Matt Gaetz, just to piss Florida off even more here.
Man, Florida's taking a fucking beating. Ray, what do you think about, do you feel like the movie was, and also I don't think in a bad way, I feel like that the way that's presented in the trailer, I didn't feel like it was dishonest. I feel like a lot of this movie, there's a lot of devices going on where it's like, see, but you see that because I'm telling you with my movie, this is why you look at it that way, right? But did you feel like it was, am I wrong? Is there, do you feel like it was misrepresented in that trailer or?
No, I don't think so. I felt like his trailers are always kind of overly simplistic versions of what you're going to see for the entire film.
Not anymore, they're not. This one, yes. This one did it right, but trailers are not overly simplistic. Trailers are, here's the fucking movie in fast forward.
Oh yeah, that does quite happen quite a bit sometimes now. But I this one I felt like it gives. I don't feel like it gives away the film.
It doesn't at all.
It doesn't, and I didn't feel deceived going in. Honestly, I was very pleasantly surprised by how apolitical it was, how or at least how much it makes you work for it. About how he's just trying to, like I said, portray the starkness, portray the realness of like what happens when we stop thinking about each other as people and just combatants and just want to attack each other and just win something, and how we don't stop and think like this is another person. And like perfect example is that scene where they're with those men that are storming that building, and after one of their guys gets shot, they go into the building, they end up taking the enemy combatants. They've got them, and now and then just execute them with seal. And it doesn't seem to be anything other than it's because it's what they're supposed to do. It's the answer that they've been given. And like, I don't think we question enough the answer we've been given sometimes. And like, especially when it comes to things like war and how we're supposed to deal with each other. We just go, well, that's the way you deal with that person. Why? Why is that the only way to deal with them? Why is that the end all be all answer? I think that Missy's response also is fair. I think that
Yeah, I agree.
it is a harsh film. Like if you're looking for something that's not stark and realistic, then don't go into this thinking that it's going to be that. And really, if you have those kind of triggers, maybe at least consider waiting for it on home, because at least then you can control the volume and things like that. Because yeah, it uses that volume menacingly to an effect. It's a punch to the face, and like it can be an emotionally tolling film, understandably so, and like just the images that are involved too.
Just one thing I just want to say really quick, Ray. I think you raised some really, really good points. I would disagree about the point that it's apolitical, because I think that what he's trying to say in this film and in other films is that we have this uncanny way of remain in the face of crisis, remaining steadfast to, the ideas and mind frames that got us into that mess in the first place, which is a very anti-reactionary stance. And yet, and to Missy's point, Missy, I completely see what you're saying. And with me, it's true crime. It's like, because
Okay.
I'll just watch the most messed up, I'll watch the most messed up horror, gory horror films, imaginable. But yeah, true crime does nothing for me. I don't want to see it. I don't care. It doesn't it doesn't fascinate me at all.
Okay.
I am with you on that one, John.
I did want to jump back on this apolitical thing, and I feel like I agree with you, John, but I also think that, so when I say apolitical, this reminds me, there was a comic, an 8-part comic a couple years ago called Days of Hate. Els Cott and Daniel Zizigi, Image put it out, Image Comics put it out in 2018. And I feel like it made a very specific point where you follow, it's similar, where it's like not so far in the future. And there are characters on both extremes politically. And I mean, that was the first thing where I saw them portraying people on the left, like blowing up fucking buildings, where like, hey, we know that some of these cops that did something drink in this bar, blow the fucking bar up. Who gives a fuck? You know? And I felt like this movie, there's a scene where when they're rushing the perimeter of the White House, and that limo, there's like 2 SUVs, I think, and a limo that come out. They're decoys, right? And they smash them. There is a woman in a fucking blouse and skirt that gets out, and they just fucking and there's a pause, and you can see that she is on. They just fucking execute her.
He goes, wait, hands up, wait, and then boom,
Yep.
boom, boom, boom. She's just done.
And it's showing like the extent to which you will go for what you think is right.
Wasting the White House press secretary as well.
Yeah, well, that was
Yeah.
even I mean, even more so. I mean, that you can almost, I don't want to say you can understand, but it's like she's between them and the target, right? But I mean, even all of that, like, and I also really like the fact that you basically have what there's the Western forces invade. Basically, this is showing January 6th, but from a totally different angle, right? Like a similar thing. And it's, I don't want to give anybody out there listening the impression that there's, I don't feel like there's a political, I mean, again, there is, but he buries the lead. And I feel like if you really look, you can see he's making some direct, like, okay, this, if you follow this through, I think this is this person or whatever, but it's not, I don't know. I don't know that for sure. There's never a moment where I felt like he went out of his way to fucking nail his opinion in my forehead.
One thing I think you raise a pretty good point, Sean. I think one point I think where I would concede I probably meet you and Ray halfway on this, and tell me what you think of this. I think he's trying to grapple with the fact that there's been arguments for so many years that there could never be an anti-war film, and it's like there's a famous quote by Francois Truffaut. He said like there's no such thing as an anti-war film because ultimately, you're going to be rooting for one side over another by the mere fact of how it's being presented on screen. And I think since that quote came out, I think, so many directors have tried in so many different ways to prove him wrong or to try to, see if they can, against the odds, create an anti-war film. And I think Alex Garland does it here by like really kind of obscuring, just sort of like, to go to Anthony's point, like obscuring like who the good guys and who the bad guys really are. I mean, California and Texas, okay, that's kind of an odd pairing, if we're going by
Yeah.
today's
Well, that's what
political.
makes it a little bit more fantasy, in my opinion. Like
Yeah,
it kind of,
yeah. You look at the racial makeup of the Western forces, so they're clearly not white supremacists that
mhm.
are storming the Capitol. You don't really, the other side, which I suppose are like the original America states, I think it was, that there, that is not really made entirely clear, what comprises them.
Mhm.
So really, I think what all those things add up to is Alex Garland trying to grapple with this, old question, can there be such a thing as an anti-war film if you're presenting war on screen, and where the risk is, it'll be exciting to the audience in one way or another by the mere fact that it's cinematic.
Yeah, I love that. And man, maybe he did succeed. I feel like maybe he did. What, Anthony, what do you think? Did Alex Garland succeed making an anti-war film?
Yes and no. Again, back to the comment I made about, showing America the mirror. Um, there are going to be folks that are geared toward that kind of stuff who are looking for violence, and that these are the people that wanted to go see this movie, based on the fact that, or not fact, but idea and notion that this is going to
Yeah.
be an war film. So, and there it is right there. People are rooting for it one way or another. Um, as far as it, you know, delivering the message, yes, it's effective at delivering the message. But here's the thing: when you're in that seat in the theater, you are transfixed to the screen. Like, you are in it, especially during that last siege part on the White House. Like, you're on the edge of your seat. You want to be in that theater. So, I mean, as an audience member, yeah, definitely, I was completely enthralled by what was happening on there. Now, do I want that to happen? No, of course not. But as far as it getting the message out that, yeah, this is wrong. And this goes back to a comment that I made to Sean about how can you tell the difference between the two guys that, like, or not the two sides, the Western forces and the president's army, because they're all in military fatigues. There's like no difference. You can't tell who's the good guy or the bad guy. So in that regard, everyone's wrong. So
Mhm.
again, those, the writing's on the wall, it's there, but as far as it succeeding at being an anti-war film, no, because it gives you just enough, if you're grasping for it, to gravitate towards one side and get, the big woohoo at the end. And I think that there are folks out there that do want to see that kind of film and went to this and found it. So unfortunately, it's an entertaining film, but depending on, what political background you may have, you're going to get a completely different, message out of it. So it's up in the air. As far as my opinion goes, though, I can see those elements, but I don't think that it succeeded necessarily, because it's got to be entertaining just enough, right? Like it's got to give you just enough of what you want to see, if for those people that are seeking that out. So, I mean, it's got to make money, right? And
Yeah.
action makes money, bullets make money, big bangs make money, explosions make money. There you go. Like it's there. It's all there for you if that's what you're looking for.
I would love to see a breakdown of how people who love action movies interpret this, because I feel like while all of those elements are there, I feel like a higher percentage of them than not will be disappointed, because I think it's a horror movie. Like I think
Absolutely.
it has all that stuff, but I feel like it does something different with it. And I mean, I'm not contesting. I think I think you're definitely right. There are going to be people that are sated just because it's blood, mayhem and bullets and fucking military or whatever. But I think a lot of those people also might end up being like, I didn't care for this. This isn't my kind of, let me go back and watch Invasion USA for the 800th time.
I was just gonna say, I think to add to Anthony's point, like I think I understand what he's saying, because there's war movies that exist, and I find them shocking and kind of horrifying, and I think that's the point of them. Like Apocalypse Now or like Full Metal Jacket, and yet there's these people that like it's like weirdly entertaining to them in a way that like I don't quite understand the zeal or the bloodlust, and like they're like missing the point, but they're like just enjoying the violence, and I think that it can be and certainly interpreted that way. So I get what you're saying. I do. I think that unfortunately anyone can interpret something and think like or just find weird enjoyment in something that they shouldn't, and be, and it is disturbing, but I mean it can certainly be manipulated in that way.
Yeah. Missy, what do you think? Do you think that this is do you think there's any element of this movie that is an action movie, or do you think I don't know, what are your thoughts on what we're talking about as far as like horror versus action, or like the way that it's going to be interpreted because of the guns and the bullets and the bam bam bam?
Well, I mean, to me, it doesn't feel like. I mean, it definitely falls under horror because I this is it's close to reality and it's fucking scary, but um like it doesn't feel like an action movie. It feels like a war movie. Like you guys are talking about whether or not it's an anti-war movie or not. I feel like it's still saying the same thing that George Romero told us at the end of Night of the Living Dead. People are the monsters. I mean, that's what I take away from it.
A lot of movies say that because it's the guy, it's the truth.
Right. And I mean, even like we were talking about the different things that we each react badly to, like with serial killers, true crime. I watch that stuff. It doesn't bother me, and I think that my brain kind of it kind of classifies it as, well, you know, that's one person and they're the monster. So it's fine. Whereas war movies feel like I don't need to be reminded that the world is an ugly place and that, you know, my lack of faith in humanity is justified. I already don't like to leave the house all that much. I like hearing you guys' perspectives because, I mean, I respect the movie more than I did. I still don't like it and I still don't want to see it again. But I have much more respect for the film and what Alex Garland was trying to do. Because having liked most of his other movies, I walked away from it kind of, okay, it felt like nothing he'd done. And I mean, there were certain things that just felt like he was exploiting the current political climate to, you know, to make a big budget movie. It felt like an exploitation film to me.
I like that you said that. I agree with that to some degree.
Why did you like that she said it?
Well, that's another question. You know, does this film add to the division that's going on in America or not? And because it's again, for, you know, depending on your mindset going into this film, you know, you're going to find reasons to root or reach for, you know, certain ends to make the film work for you. So again, you know, is this movie an exploitation film? Does it add to the division in America? That's going to be, you know, that's on, you know, person to person. I don't personally think that this adds to division, but I could definitely see how that interpretation could be, you know, seen. So and I guess that's the point that I liked, is that somebody's saying, hey, yeah, but I mean, from this angle, you know, it's bad optics. So
Right. I would like to talk about the fact that for most of the movie's runtime, I was absolutely. Now, anybody listening to this now, I feel like there's been no spoilers. I mean, maybe light spoilers. I'm going to go a huge spoiler right now. So if you have not seen the movie and you want to, shut it off. Shut them down. I was absolutely sure Jesse was going to die. And I was fucking horrified for the whole movie from a certain point, pretty much from the moment she got in their car. I was just waiting for it to happen. And I have not been that scared for a character. I draw comparisons with this movie to Martyrs. The original Martyrs, people, there is no American remake. That was a dream somebody had. It doesn't exist. Don't even bother looking it up. It's not there. But Martyrs is a movie I feel like I'm not in a hurry to watch again. I will watch it again. It was important. I didn't like what it did to me. But I appreciate what it did to me. And I feel like this is very similar, but also the level of fear I had for a character in Martyrs in that movie was a very short period of time, because very quickly it's like, oh no, she's fucked. Okay. But I mean, I don't even know how to explain the fear I had there. And that was the same concentration of fear, but extended for most of a fucking, you know, full-length film. And it was exhausting. Like, it was absolutely fucking exhausting. And I was just terrified for the whole movie. I mean, there were other elements too. I mean, obviously we're talking about like the all of the sound design is just aggressive, malevolent, like it's doing you in, right? And it puts you in this heightened fight or flight state, and there's terrible things happening. You lose some characters along the way, and there's heartbreaking moments. The Jesse Plemons blows my mind, because the first time I ever saw that guy was Breaking Bad, Todd. And I'll never forget that episode with him, because he looks like the most all-American motherfucker, and then he does something that just literally like, are you holy fuck. And I thought I would always see that dude as that evil motherfucker. And then, like, for the rest of the series, you see him and you're like, oh, even though he looks like it would be the opposite. And then I've seen him in stuff where he's a goofball, he's stupid, he's a
Yeah.
sweetheart. And now this again. And the thing is, he can just turn it on. He doesn't require anything really to do it. And he is so fucking malevolent. His presence in this movie is just off the fucking chart. And I've seen people complain like, oh yeah, the fuck, he was in the movie for 5 minutes. Are you kidding me? Those 5 minutes might get him a
It's an
fucking
impressive
Academy
5
Award.
minutes.
He
Yeah.
I mean,
he
not
wasn't
to
originally supposed to be.
really.
There was somebody else. I have no idea who it was that
Oh.
dropped out like the day before, and they're like, oh shit, what are we gonna do? And Kirsten does. I'll ask my husband Jesse, if he, will do it. I mean, he's read the script, and lo and behold, Jesse Plemons jumped in to save the day, so to speak.
Dude, the level of calm, like when he shoots those people, it's like mid-sentence, doesn't skip a fucking beat, shows absolutely no reaction to it. And I mean, obviously we talked about this a little while ago, like he's a psychopath, he's using the circumstances around him to do what he likes to do, which is fucking kill people. Obviously he's got a dump truck full of bodies and a bunch of lye to spread on them, right?
Were your
But
eyes on his fingers during that
Oh,
scene? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
You kept looking at his fingers. He like moves them back and forth from the trigger back and forth, and you just can't keep your eyes off the trigger, and you just like,
And they're filthy. His fingers are filthy with dried blood.
yeah, and
Yes.
your heart just
Yeah.
tightens into a ball every time he moves his finger towards the trigger, and then it's almost kind of like he's like, grabbing your pulse.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely terrifying. And my God, I just wanted to bring like just the level of horror and also just real quick, I love that Alex Garland continues to use Jeff Barrow and Ben Salisbury. Jeff Barrow is one of the main instrumentalists from the group Portishead, and he has Beak is his band with Ben Salisbury, and they've I don't know how many albums they have, but I think they've done the score to every one of his movies, and he fit in 2 fucking tracks from Suicide.
Yeah.
So in the last year, I've seen 2 movies on the big screen use Hamburger Lady by Throbbing Gristle, and now this movie used 2 Suicide tracks. So we like never thought I'd ever see either of those bands represented on the big screen. So hats off. So anyway,
Well, you never saw
sorry,
The Crow, so I mean, what do you want? You didn't like The
there's
Crow. They used Henry Rollins' cover of
Ghost
Ghost
Rider,
Rider,
but it's
Suicide.
Henry Rollins' version. And as much as I like
And
Henry
it's
Rollins,
awful. It's fucking awful.
I mean, but I'm just like Suicide is like as outer fringe as you. Them and Throbbing Gristle, it doesn't get more fringe, right? I mean, that's it. So I really appreciate that I'm seeing this stuff and people are using it. But anyway, sorry, I had to detour that before it got away from me. Ray, what do you think? Do you think that there is any level of Jesse's character that is a manipulator? Or do you think that she just ultimately in the end gets an opportunity and seizes it because she knows that a sacrifice was made and she's got to put it to use? Or do you think that there's an element of manipulation from the get-go?
Ooh, that's a damn good question. I had not considered
Anybody
that.
else? Anybody that wants to jump in on it while Ray thinks about it?
Absolutely. And you see that immediately, and that's why Lee's character gets pissed at her right in the beginning. It's like, and her partner, and goes to tell him like, you fucking let her in her car. Why did you do that? She's a child. Like what? And it's interesting because that's when you start to see this like hard exterior and facade start to come down throughout the film. Now, I'll touch on that in a second, but I mean, And just to touch on what you said earlier, I felt no fear for Jesse's character. She shouldn't have been there. She is the epitome of what the naivety of youth is,
Yeah.
and you saw the chaos that it caused and ensued up until the end, to where she gets her magic moment, and I thought her character was just a part of the horror. In war, you don't want young people involved in all that stuff, and then of course to throw them into the fray, it makes for bad decision making, and it just makes situations 10 times worse, which it did. It caused the death of everybody around her. She shouldn't have been there, and yeah, so it's funny because this is the horror part of me going, yeah, I can't wait till that young gal gets chopped up. It's just one of those things that I was waiting for but never happened, and ultimately saw that as a betrayal to Lee's character. Because Lee is the war-hardened photographer who's been out there, and she lets her guard down to this young lady, and ultimately, what did that end up doing? It led in PTSD and all these other basically all the feelings started to hit her, and look what happened. She ended up having that breakdown, which ultimately ended up leading to her death because she was trying to look out for somebody instead of herself. I'm not saying that she shouldn't have made that decision, but I just thought it was a betrayal to the character to have this like really strong female character that's like right there in the forefront of the film, and just break her down and off her like that towards the end. I didn't like that decision, and I didn't understand whether or not there was malice behind it, or the intention of possibly setting up something or manipulating the situation. But I feel like she did to some degree just to be able to tag along, and whether or not it was her ultimate goal in the end to eliminate competition around her, it that early decision making did lead to the downfall of many characters, and it's unfortunate that that's what happened. And then what happens? She gets to walk off into the sunset, and now will probably be the most famous person on earth because of this photo that she took. Anyway, let me step back.
Ooh, I don't know if it's intentional. I don't know if it's intentional. I think it's just her. I think it's maybe just someone trying to get their moment. And I think that Joe sees that and is trying to help. Because as he says to Lee early on, like, well, you were that, how old were you?
Yeah.
Weren't you the same age when you started? But it does cause Lee to have a problem because her objectivity is gone. She now, I mean, I think it's not just her. I think it's not just the girl. I think it's also the loss of her mentor. Like she lost her mentor, like like at the same day, like earlier in the day, and
Mhm.
like, oh, that's an interesting scene because we don't see her like afterward. We see her like cleaning the blood off the seats. We don't see her grieve. We see Joe grieve. We see Joe freaking the fuck out.
Yeah.
And we see I'm totally blanking on her name, but we see her like literally become so worked up that she vomits on herself, and like
Oh
she's
yeah.
obviously
Oh
just scarred by what she's just gone through. But Lee is not grieving. And then when we get to that sequence in Washington D.C., the grief is hitting her. She's lost her objectivity. She's lost the distance. So now it's there, and now she's terrified. She can't just go do the job. She's terrified. She's terrified for herself. She's terrified for them. And it's honestly probably the one thing that's keeping her alive for most of that sequence. And unfortunately, the girl has lost her ability to have that same survival instinct. So she makes a poor decision, and it costs Lee her life because Lee's the only
yeah.
person that's stepping in and going like, "The fuck are you doing?" Like she pushes her out of the way. And I thought for a moment there, because of the look on her face, because it was slow-mo, that she was like yelling at her, like, what are you doing? But it clearly was like, oh no, I've just been shot, I'm going down. And to a certain extent, yes, it is manipulative, but I don't think it's there's malice in it. But I think that it does cause Lee, along with the death of her mentor, to lose her objectivity, and like she no longer has that distance that she's been working from. She's now there, and it's rough. I mean, and oh man, the other thing that's so shitty about that too, that really like accents it, is the fact that she saves her at the beginning of the film. When
Mhm.
she's there and she's taking a photo and she's like, she's there and all that stuff's happening. Lee is smart enough to see that woman running in and know she is going to blow up this truck.
Mhm.
And she pulls her down, and that truck, that explosion goes off, and Lee walks away from it, and that girl walks away from it because Lee was there. And she gets her ass saved twice by Lee. And oh man,
Yeah.
if that girl does not dedicate her career to the memory of Lee and what she did for her, she's lost as a person.
Well, that's kind of what I wonder. Like, I don't know if it's just a slow motion, but when Lee gets shot, Jesse just stands up and leaves the room. So, in other words, is this just the first body she's willing to walk across to get to what she wants? Or is it just, I don't have time to grieve right now. I have to go do this thing. Like, I really don't know how to interpret it at all. And
I think
I'm
it's
glad.
I think it's the moment. I think a little bit is the moment, because Joe also just keeps going too.
Yeah.
Like they both have this like ability to like in that moment like keep themselves at a distance of worrying about what's happening, and then once they stop, once they're like not moving
Yeah.
anymore, then it's probably going to
Which,
catch up to them, much like the mentor's death. Like it's
yeah.
Joe gets in the truck and he's driving, and they're all in the car, and they're like all kind of like trying to get to where they're going, and they're all kind of okay, especially, and even when they're like driving through that. Wow, it's so chaotic but so beautiful a shot at the same time, when they're driving through that forest with that tree on fire and
Yeah.
the embers are just floating past them. It's so beautiful, but at the same time chaos, that eh, they seem like a little at peace, and yet he's dying. He is fading away at that moment. And oh
Yeah.
my god. It's 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 so impressive a shot. My God.
So, Missy, you had told me you don't care for any of the characters because basically you felt that they were foolish putting themselves in these situations, with cameras, right? So did these deaths affect you at all, or were you just like, well, fuck you?
The only one that I really cared about was the mentor, the one who told them not to go into that situation, and they did because of the girl, um, who I do think is manipulative. I think she played Lee and Joe against each other throughout the whole thing
Mm-hmm.
to get what she wanted. I don't know that it was malevolent, but it was to get what she wanted, and it resulted in the deaths of a lot of people around her. But Sammy, the mentor, I he just came to save them. He knew there was a good chance he was going to die. He did it anyways to save his
Yep.
friends. Um, him I cared about, but everybody else I was relatively indifferent. Um, especially like I didn't care about Jessie. I thought she was a manipulative kind of spoiled brat, but um, I liked hearing what you had said to me about Joe, um, and kind of everybody's motivations for doing things. Um,
Mm-hmm.
when I had initially said that I thought they felt flat to me. Um, so I mean, I have more respect for the characters but I still didn't care. I just cared about him, Sammy.
Okay.
That one felt genuine.
He believes in the job. Joe is a fucking adrenaline junkie. He's got no more control over himself than a heroin addict does. And the two women are really, in a way, they both have families that are sitting on their farms pretending it's not happening. So it's a rebellion thing to some degree. And it's like it really is. Jesse is the younger version of Lee. It's like you there's a line in State of Grace where it's like, that's your life. It's just like you do this, a bunch of shit happens, and then that's your life. And that's Lee is just, and I think that's what we see. And Anthony, you pointed out there's a point where Lee, what is the point you told me where Lee loses her hardened, there's one specific symbolic act in the movie.
It's while they're in the dress shop.
Yep.
And when Lee is asked to put on a dress, basically she's asked to take off the mask, take down the facade, and be human for a moment. And when she does that, and even accepts the compliment of like, you're pretty when you smile, and she's staring at herself in the mirror and sees that maybe there's this other part of me that never got to fully be fleshed out because I've chosen this life. I never got to be a mother. I never got to be use a maternal instinct. I never got to allow all the chaos that I've been living in to really sink in because I've had all this stuff on. And so so she allows herself to be human for a moment, and in doing so allows all that stuff in to really take hold of her. And obviously it's what ends up being her downfall at the end. Now, had she stuck to that hard exterior, I mean, everybody loves a hard ass with a heart of gold, and that's unfortunately what she is, but it ends up costing her a life, which I thought was a poor decision in the film. But that's the moment where she sees that she's still human and that she's capable of all these things, but at what cost, especially at that point. But that's the moment for me, is when she tries on the dress, and for that brief moment she's reminded that she's human and capable of feeling all these human emotions, but not being able to control how they come at her and how they manifest, or in her reaction, and how she's able to conduct herself going forward beyond that point.
I think that all makes sense. I think that the dress point's an excellent point. I don't know. One of the things about Lee, I'm sorry, but one of the things about Lee that I think about is that, one, there was that scene where she's at the very beginning of the film where she's in her hotel room, and we get that sequence of her memories, a flashback of her remembering like pictures she's taken and places she's been. And then in a couple scenes later, we maybe 5-10 minutes later, we get that sequence where she's sitting with Sammy on the sofa, and she says to him, all those times when I was in these places taking pictures and sending them back home, I thought I was sending back warnings.
Yep.
And it feels like, to a certain extent, like she still understands this is the job, but she's, in a way, she's lost her faith in the power of what she was doing. That, like, what she was doing to her was, here's what everyone else is, this is what is going on, and this is what we should avoid, this is how we shouldn't act. And now she's seeing it in her own country, in her own homes, and it's what she's been doing with her life has not worked, and it's failed, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah. John, thoughts?
Yeah, I think the dress shop scene might have been one of my favorites, along with and you want to talk about horror, and you want to talk about just the uncanny imagery scaring the fuck out of you. The sniper scene where you've got like the Santa Claus and the Christmas music playing.
Yeah.
And yeah, can we talk any, I'm curious, any thoughts about the jumping between cars scenes, that scene that took place afterward, with yeah, Jesse like jumping between cars and the other guy jumping between the other car, just with a kind of interesting compare and contrast with those guys.
I think it goes back to the thing that's already been brought up, is that like they're to a certain extent, after a while, they're adrenaline junkies. They're not only doing it because it's a job and they have like a belief about it, but they're doing it because they like love the action, they love the excitement, the danger, and like we're seeing that she's embracing that. Like it's not just them now. It's not just these hardened, people that have been reporters and press for a while. It's now Jesse too. She's giving herself into that and like enjoying it, the rush.
And again, instead of learning that lesson, because what does that scene ultimately lead her to? It leads her to a
Yep.
pit of corpse. And where's the lesson in that? There isn't one. She chose to ignore it and to continue on. So I mean, ultimately, those types of behaviors and well, risky behaviors are going to lead somewhere, and it's probably going to end up being her in a pit somewhere at some point. But I mean, that's another, one of those things that pissed me off. She just chose to ignore it, and especially, and again, especially after the cost. It cost
Two people their lives.
people their lives.
Well, three if you, yeah,
Three
because
people,
Sammy
yeah.
too.
3 people their lives because of that, and chose to ignore it and continue on, for the sake of getting the shot. Whereas, Lee always had a purpose. The purpose was to what? Warn, use her shots as a warning. It wasn't about opportunity for Lee, whereas it is for her. And that's just what I don't like about the character. So the comparison between the two, between Lee and Jesse, where it's like, oh, well, she was just like you at that age, but was she really? Because the intentions behind, what they do are very different. So that's what I got to say about that.
Yeah, that's the first scene where I was not happy with her after that. I mean, I didn't think she should have, finagled her way into the car in the first place, but if she didn't, we don't have a movie. So obviously that was going to happen, but that seemed really fucking dumb. And I mean, ultimately, who knows? We don't know what happened. So it's very possible that Jesse Plemons' character and the others were laying in wait, and that could have, whoever crossed their path first, it could have happened to, whatever. But I mean, even just watching it, you don't know how that scene's gonna unfold, and like he drives away and disappears, and I'm like, what the, like, those two guys didn't seem very sane. So right off the bat, I'm like, I don't know who the fuck these guys are, but like, I don't want this guy in my car, and I definitely wouldn't want her in his car.
Right.
Like, it just, and Sammy says, like, does this feel weird to you? Like, I feel like there's all these signs not to do this, and she does it anyway, and that's because she's just kind of like having fun. And it's almost, Joe is the adrenaline junkie, but he is there servicing Lee in a way, right? Where like, when they're bunking out for the first night and you could see the tracers in the tree line. He's like, they're there tomorrow morning. We're going. And Lee's like, oh, geez. Because he just wants the rush. She's got a plan in mind, but she's like, okay, I know how to control him. So I'll give him a little bit of what he wants, and then it will probably get me something that I can use. But they have a symbiotic relationship. Jesse's just a wild card, and she's taking the lessons from Lee, but she's taking this adrenaline thing from Joey, and not really, it's not the same thing. You can't, they don't work together in the same person. And man, yeah, that was a very, very disappointing. The whole way, everything from that moment on happened. I was just like, fuck, man. God damn. Like, just talk about a bad bad decision. I mean, why would that dude speed the fuck off? You know, it's like, I don't know.
Why would she jump in the car of some guy she doesn't even know in a
Right, like
post-apocalyptic
everything
America?
you've
She's
seen
a
up
fucking
till
idiot.
now. Yeah, right. I mean, I don't. Very good point.
Hey, it's what Baz Luhrmann says. Do something once a day that scares you.
Oh man, maybe he would allow me to. I'm not a Baz Luhrmann fan, so maybe he would allow me to show up at his house and throw unopened cans of Pepsi Cola at him. It would scare him, might make me feel better. There you go, Mr. Luhrmann. If you're listening, hit me up. I'd love to throw full cans of soda at him. Lars von Trier too, I think, as well.
I'll help. I'll supply the cans.
Closing thoughts on Alex Garland's Civil War. Missy.
I would just say, if you want to see it, it's a well-made movie. Know what you're getting into. It's a very aggressive war picture. It's very bleak. If you're looking for a good time at the movies, don't go see this. Go see. That was a great time.
Fair.
I was much happier with the Killer Spider movie. So just know what you're getting into. We've had a lot of different perspectives here. Some of us loved it. It spun me out for a day. I don't care to experience it again.
Sorry, I was on the phone with Mr. Ron DeSantis. We were just talking about how you're all banned from Florida and not allowed at Walt Disney World ever. So
happily, I can accommodate you. Never been to a Disney World or Disneyland. Never gonna
Me
be.
neither.
You don't know what you're missing.
Oh, I do. I'm happy to miss it.
I like the movie for all of its darkness, and I like the movie for all of its moments of beauty, and I like the movie for its technical triumphs for sure. I don't know if this is one I want people to. Well, I do want people to go watch it. I just feel like I feel weird condoning it. You know what I mean? I feel weird.
Yeah.
Saying that this is definitely one everybody needs to get out and go see in the theater on IMAX and all that, because that's what I did. And I think what I took away from the film is basically just that war is hell, obviously, for both sides, and there are no winners, and survivors have to deal with something very ugly after that, whether or not it's immediate or it comes in their quietest of moments, and that it's just a spectacle to behold. So in that regard, yeah, I guess go see the film. See it as crazily as you want to or as low-key as you want to, but I think it should be watched. There is a message to take away. Depending on what you're looking for, you will find it, because it is very open to interpretation at times. But ultimately the film is it's a marvel and should be experienced. So with that being said, I do give it my final endorsement, and maybe over time so will Mr. Ron DeSantis. So we'll see.
Final endorsement sounds like a movie that stars Robert Patrick and Shannon Tweed.
I'm okay with that.
John, final thoughts? Yeah, I think when we get to the end of the year and we do our end of the year roundup, I can guarantee whether it's on our lists or not, we are still going to be thinking about this film.
Oh yeah.
Around that time. If the film was the wish fulfillment, hyper political action epic that people wanted it to be, we'd forget about it by July.
Yep. Yeah, well said. Ray, final thoughts?
I think a lot of people should go see it. Obviously, if you have any of the issues that Missy described, again, maybe select your environment carefully. Um, but I think it's an important film for sure, and I think if nothing else, because sometimes we tend to get numb. We tend to get numb with what we see on news, what we see on TV, what we experience in films, and sometimes something has to come along that jars us and reminds us that the things that we see that and experience that we are still humans. We're still people on either side, and we need to be reminded of that, and be reminded that, like, on either side of a conflict, there's just people, and and when we lose that objectivity um, or subjectivity, then it becomes easy to do terrible things to each other, and
Yeah.
we need a reminder that you know everyone is going through their own thing, and everyone has purposes or things that they're fighting for, but when we lose the fact that we're dealing with other human beings, and that we should respect each other and try to move forward, that um terrible things can happen. And I think that's part of the point of the film, that trying to avoid terrible things from happening, trying to avoid us getting to a point where it gets so filled with anger that we cannot move forward except with violence.
Yeah, well, very well said, Ray. Man, um, I would just like to say, as my final thought, and spinning off what you said about numbness, I feel like we all use horror. We love it, and there's a lot of things we find in it. But one of the things that I think we naturally find, especially now in the last, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, as the world spirals out of control, sometimes it seems like it's comfort food. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? But horror, the thing that drew us to horror initially as children was it made us feel funny. It affected us in a way that made us stop and think differently about the world. And it's very difficult for a film to do that when you're an adult, and especially when the world around you can be very, very horrific. And so I'm happy when a film is not comfort food. When a horror film, it doesn't mean it's better than a horror film that I find comforting. Evil Dead 2, total comfort food, right? But this film really affected me, and I wasn't numb to it at all. And I appreciate that. I appreciate, because I know there's other films out there that would do that, but in a different way, and I just don't want to go there. But this did it, and I really appreciate that. I feel like Alex Garland and his team did exactly what they wanted to do, and I'm glad they did it. I have not had a theatrical experience. I mean, the only thing I can even think of that was anywhere near, and it's two totally different kinds of movies, but like Hereditary is one of those movies where it was just fucking nerve-wracking, right? Like there were so many things in Hereditary the first time you see it in the theater, it's just like, oh my God. Like I haven't had a fucking theatrical viewing like that, and I don't know how long. As opposed to Midsummer, where I just feel emotionally like beaten by the end of the first act. But this was not comfort food, and I appreciated that. And I appreciate when a horror film can still be what a horror film was to me when I was 7, because it's just so fucking rare. We've just consumed those things and they've become comfort food. So fucking hats off to Alex Garland. And yeah, that's Elements of Horror, Civil War. John, you're doing the Moving Histories podcast. What is your most recent episode? Is it the Shogun or is that still coming?
Shogun, we're going to be recording that at the end of next week after the final episode airs. By the time this airs, we'll be really close to recording it. I don't want to give too many details
No,
about
that's fine.
the recording itself, lest some certain elements of it fall through. But just, yeah, if you're a fan of Shogun, such as I am, be sure to keep an eye out in early May for not one, but 2 episodes of Moving Histories. Our most recent one is on White House Plumbers, that HBO series about the Watergate break-in with Woody Harrelson and Justin Theroux. And just recently, we recorded an episode with Don Miller, the author of the book Masters of the Air, upon which the recent Apple TV series is based on.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and my other podcast, This Movie Saved My Life. We just did not too long ago an episode where my co-host Miles watches The Godfather for the first time, where we talk about, among other things, my recent parenthood journey. And we're recording an episode tomorrow on exploitation cinema of the 70s, or how trash movies can save cinema.
That's fantastic. And I
That's
can't wait to
awesome.
listen because I'll just be I love this like kind of sub series that This Movie Saved My Life has, where it's like Miles watches this for the first time. And I'll be very curious because I'll just go on man, Godfather's an amazing movie. I haven't seen it since I was in high school, not a fan. I feel like Peter Griffin said it the best. It insists upon itself, Lois. It insists upon itself. I feel like that's like just like that. Like anyway, but yeah. So listeners, Moving Histories. This movie saved my life.
Both on Instagram. Come follow us.
Yeah, on Instagram. John's on Twitter. We're all on various social media. I couldn't tell you what the fuck my handle is because whatever, but there's a bunch of Horror Vision coming because we're recording a lot. So I've got some stuff in the bank that's going to drop. And like I said, if anybody that's like, that's not a fucking horror movie, remember you said that. And good night. And I don't know. Be good to each other, for God's sakes.
A pandemic of violence floods the streets of major cities as cases of the media-dubbed murder virus, MV20, soar, causing those infected to go on killing sprees. Caught in the middle, police detective Angela Miller finds her only trustworthy ally in the self-proclaimed psychic PI, Gerald Henry. As the two try to navigate the violence, they are drawn into New Age guru Abramelin Harvest's plot to heal the planet. Harvest's missive?
The world is sick, and humanity is the infection.
The cure? Murder. From the twisted mind of Sean C. Baker, author of A Collection of Desires and Shadowplay in Book 1, Kim and Jesse, comes his most vicious novel yet, Murder Virus. Available where books are sold.
I threw an unopened can of soda at somebody once in high school, and it hit them, and Man, I felt it. It was, it's not a good thing to do to somebody. It was a weird circumstance. I ain't gonna get into it.